keeping track of your expenses is a hassle. I know it is for me. You buy something, you promise yourself you'll log it later, and then forget. But what if tracking your spending was as easy as sending a message? This AI powered spending tracker lets you text your expenses, upload receipts, or even send PDFs. No more lost records, no more guessing where your money went. And in this video, I'll show you exactly how to build it. You can even ask the AI about your earlier expenses. So let's get started with building this workflow. So this workflow starts with a Telegram trigger where you send a message. Then we have to check the data type to see whether we have received a text, an image, a PDF, or an audio file. Then it processes that, combines all of that into this variable, and sends it to our trusty AI agent. And this AI agent will then determine what kind of expense it was, and it will log it into Airtable. And if you ask it about any particular entries, it will use the search tool. It'll look up all of the existing entries and give you information on what you're asking, and it'll send it back to you as a Telegram message. So let's go ahead and build this out. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new workflow. Go ahead and call it. We're going to start with a simple chat trigger. And once everything is set up and working, we'll build out the Telegram part of it as well. So the first step is going to be a chat trigger. Okay, we can just test that to make sure everything is running. Okay, perfect. So the chat trigger is done. Next, we are going to add an AI agent. So go to advanced AI and search for AI agent. Perfect. Don't worry about this being red for now. Once we attach the language model and the memory and we run it again, this will take care of itself. And then when we do add Telegram, we will have to come back and change this particular message. We do need to add a system message to this prompt. So for that, I'm going to go to expression. I'm just going to go over to my existing automation, just copy the prompt from there and bring it over here. All right, perfect. So basically, we are telling the language model that it's a helpful assistant for expense tracking. It has to determine whether I'm asking about a new entry or asking about an existing entry, giving it the current date, and then telling it that if it's a new entry, you need to create a new entry with the corresponding category. These are the categories that I've just fed in as dummy data. Obviously, you can change these however it suits your personal record keeping. And we are also giving it instructions on how to process images of receipts or PDFs. And finally, just some housekeeping. We're telling it we're telling it that if it's an inquiry about an existing expense, just use the search entries tool, which we will create to get information and answer my question. So now that this is ready, we're going to go and attach a chat model. For this, we're just going to stick to OpenAI because that's the easiest one that I have set up for now. But you could certainly use DeepSeek as well. It should do the job more than adequately. If you don't have a credential set up, you just go ahead and hit this little pencil icon and add your API key, which you can get from platform.openai.com. I've already got mine set up. GPT-4o mini is fine. You can also use GPT-4o, the full version. And the advantage of using GPT-4o is that if you have a lot of entries in your database and you need to search all of them, 4o may do a better job of processing all of that. So let's go ahead and select that for now. This is all set. And let's go ahead and attach a memory buffer as well. The window buffer memory is fine because we do need the chat to remember the last one or two things that we message, just in case there is some context required to answer the query that we send to it. And let's go ahead and test everything. So we can go here, hit test step, open the chat, hello, and hopefully, right, so there's no session ID found. Let's go ahead and diagnose that. So the JSON chat input trigger is not working. So the solution for that is to first remove the window buffer memory, start everything again. And once we get the reply, then we can add the window buffer memory with the correct variable because it will have already picked it up. So now you can see it has indeed found the session ID, and we will need to change this once we do shift over to Telegram. All right, so this is set as well. Now we need to add two tools, and the two tools that we're going to add are Airtable create a record and Airtable search records. So to do that, we need to go over to Airtable. So now that we are in Airtable, we want to go ahead and create a new table. Let's go ahead. I'm just going to start from scratch. Close this and let's give it a name. We're going to call it 1T expense tracker. And we need to change the fields as well. So let's call this details. Single line text is fine. Instead of notes, this should be the amount. And this is going to be currency. Decimal places, we can leave it too because some transactions indeed may be with decimal places. And let's go ahead and just hit save. Now for this, we are going to change assignee to category. And this is going to be a single line text. You can hit save. And for instead of status, we are going to change this to a date field, and we're going to call that a date. Perfect. Now, one other thing that we can do is we can actually sort all of the transactions by date from latest to earliest. So it'll show the most recent records at the top. Perfect. And these three records are blank, so we can just go ahead and delete these. And our table is ready. Now let's go back to n8n and set up the connection between n8n and Airtable. So let's go ahead and click on this little plus icon and search for Airtable. And once Airtable loads, we do need to create a connection. So we have to have a credential to connect with. And for that, we're going to click this little pencil icon. I already have mine set up, but if you don't have it, you have to go back to Airtable, click on your username and go over to Builder Hub. And within Builder Hub, you will need to create a new token. And once you create a new token, you will have to give it these three scopes. And once these three scopes are enabled, you go down to access, add a base, and choose whichever base that you are working with. So with that set up, we can exit the Builder Hub. Make sure you would have grabbed your access token and pasted it here. I've already done that. I'm going to go ahead and just close this for now. This is all set. Now, what we are doing is we want to create a record. So we're going to create a new record in the table. The tool description, we can just give it a little bit of, we can give it a name here and say create new entries. And we can add that to the description as well. Because the description is important because it does, it explains to the language model what this particular tool does. So you can leave the resource as record. We are creating, and we do need to select which base that we're working with. So let's go ahead and click this little drop down. And we are working with YT expense tracker. The table, again, you'd have to choose that. And table 1 is fine. Mapping each column manually, that's fine. So values to send. Now for these three values, we're just going to let the language model define the parameter for all of them. So just click on this little star AI icon for all four of these. And this is all set. If we were to test this again, we should see that a new entry does indeed get created in our table. So let's go ahead and do that. So it's throwing an error. Let's go ahead and see what that error is. Other info. So the timestamp is the issue. Okay, so to solve this problem, the Airtable actually expects that there should be time as well as the date. So let's go ahead and go back into our expense tracker, and under date, we're just going to double click here and make sure to include the time. And we want an ISO format. So we had forgotten to update these two things because our prompt says send the date as an ISO format, and that does include the time. So with that done, we can go ahead and hit save, confirm the change. And if we go back to the expense tracker and run that prompt again, let's see if it does indeed create it. And because we are using the buffer memory, we can just say try again, and it should attempt to do it and create the record. And you can see that the record was indeed successfully created. So lunch with friends for $20 in the eating out category has been successfully recorded. If we pop over to Airtable, we should see that that record is indeed there. So now that we have the functionality to create new records set, let's go ahead and add the functionality to retrieve records. And to do that, we can click this little plus icon, go back to Airtable. Instead of getting a record, we actually want to search for records. Let's change the name, retrieve expenses. Let's rename that. And we can also use it, give it a description. Retrieve expenses from database. Perfect. The base that we are working with is this one. The table is table 1. We can leave return all on for now, and we can ignore filter by formula for now. Let's go ahead and click out of here, hit save. And you'll see that the chat is blank, which means that the buffer memory has forgotten what entries we've made earlier. So let's go ahead and ask it, have I spent anything on eating out this month? And hopefully it should retrieve a record and show us, yes, you have spent $20 on eating out this month. And if we ask it, what was the detail of the expense? It should go back here and give us some details that lunch with friends with an amount of $20 recorded on 2025-03-11. So now that we've tested that the basic functionality of this AI tool, of this AI agent is working fine, the next step is to build out the Telegram triggers. So we can go ahead and hide the chat for now. And let's add a Telegram trigger. So we can go ahead and disconnect this. We click the little plus icon, search for Telegram, and scroll all the way down, go to triggers, and we want to say on message. Now, in order to set up the Telegram trigger correctly, we need to go into Telegram and start a chat with an account called BotFather, which is this one here. Make sure that you're actually, you're messaging the correct one. And this literally lets you generate new bots. So I'm going to go ahead and click message. And if we scroll up, we'll see that /new bot will let you create a new bot. So I'm going to click that and it's going to send that message. Perfect. All right, new bot. How are we going to call it? Let's call it IT expense tracker. That's the name. And we also need to make a username. Let's call that YT expense tracker bot. Perfect. So the bot is now ready and it gives us an access token. So we want to go ahead and copy this access token. And if we were to create a new credential, we would go down here and replace that access token over here. And that would set up the Telegram credential. Now we don't want it to trigger on just a message because we might end up sending a file. So let's go ahead and trigger it on star, which means all updates, right? And then we'll have filters to make sure that everything goes where it's supposed to go. So we can click out of here. And let's go ahead and hook up this Telegram trigger with this. All right, so now that this is set, we can go ahead and hit test step, right? And we'll see that I had already sent it a message /start, and the message did indeed come through. Perfect. Let's go back out and let's connect this with our AI agent. And we do need to make some changes for the AI agent to now understand that it has to pick up text from Telegram. So let's go back in here. And instead of JSON/chat input, the source for the prompt is now going to be defined below. And the prompt is going to be an expression, and that is the text of the chat from the Telegram trigger. And since we already tested the trigger, we should have this data over here. So I'm going to grab text. Let's click, drag it down here, JSON message text. So this is fine. And we can test that and we'll see that it does. So the buffer memory is now throwing an error, right? And to fix that, we need to go into the buffer memory. And the session ID is also no longer going to be the session ID from the chat, we need to define that below, and the session ID is going to be the chat ID, right? Let's go ahead and drag that here, and now this is working fine. And let's test the workflow one more time. So now that we're testing, the trigger event is now going to be from Telegram. So we have to go back to Telegram and say hello. And we'll see that there is indeed, data has indeed been received. Now we're not getting a reply because the agent is not able to send a reply with anything. And we're going to fix that by adding a Telegram node here. So click the plus icon, search for Telegram. And now we want to send a text message. And everything here is set. The chat ID is going to be the chat ID, which we can drag and drop here. And that we can click out, and the text is going to be the output of the AI agent, right? And if we test this, hopefully this message should show up in our Telegram. And if we go over to Telegram, we'll see that this message did indeed show up. But now we want to take this to the next level, and we want to enable voice transcription and processing images as well. So let's go back out, and we can start by setting up voice transcription. So let's drag this back a little bit. And in between, we now have to add a couple of nodes. So the first node that we need to add is going to be a switch. So we're going to go into flow and scroll down and go to switch. So what switch does is it allows you to test multiple conditions, and depending on how those conditions evaluate, you can control the flow of information over different paths. So value 1 in this case is going to be text. So if text, right, meaning if this text field, and we can go to string exists. So if the text field exists, we want the flow to follow this path, right? Now the next field that we want to add is going to be a voice note. In order to do that, we need to test the workflow and actually send a voice note through Telegram. So n8n can recognize what that data looks like. So let's go ahead and click test workflow, go back to Telegram, and this time we're going to send it a voice note. I spent $20 on coffee and a sandwich today. And you'll see that the workflow did indeed execute successfully, but nothing happened because we have not allowed for any route for the text message to go all the way down here. So we can go back into switch, and this time we want to add a new routing rule. And if we scroll down here, we'll see that there is a new object called voice here. So now we can go ahead and drag voice over here, and this is a object. So if voice exists, then we want this path to kick in. So now that we have this route created, we need to download the file, and then we need to send that file to OpenAI for transcription. So that's the first thing we'll do is go back and go to Telegram. We want to get a file. That's the name. Let's go ahead and get a file, and the file ID can be found over here. File ID. We can go ahead and drag that, and let's test that and make sure that the output is correct. And the output is going to look like this. It's going to be called data. We need to send this file to OpenAI for transcription. So let's go ahead, go to OpenAI. We want to transcribe a recording, and the input data field name is data, which corresponds to what we have seen from Telegram. And we can test this. And if we test this, so you can see that the test was successful and OpenAI did transcribe the audio correctly. Perfect. So we can't directly hook this up into the AI agent because it's expecting a message prompt. And here we are sending it a different variable from the transcription. Let's go ahead and hit that plus icon, go to data transformation, and select edit fields. We want to leave this at manual mapping, and we need to hook this up with the rest of the flow. So we can connect this over to this, and we can also break this connection and hook this up to this as well. So we can reference the data from these two fields into this. I'm going to go ahead and go to add field. Now that the field that we want to set is called prompt, because that's the new prompt that we are going to send to the AI agent. And we can go to Telegram trigger, and let's see if we can find the text. So we are not able to find the text because we need to send the text again. But first, let's go ahead and just choose the audio transcription from OpenAI. So this text can go down here. So JSON.text, this is fine. And we need to go back to test workflow. Let's go ahead and hit save once. Let's go back to test workflow, and we need to get data from Telegram one more time. So I'm just going to type in hello, and we'll see that we have indeed received data in Telegram. We can go back to edit fields now, and the next field we want to add here is text hello. So we can go ahead and drag that. Perfect. This is fine. We can then go ahead and hook this up to our AI agent, and instead of this being our new prompt, the prompt is going to be from the edit fields node. Let's go ahead and drag this here and erase the rest of that. If we click out and hit save, now if we send another message through Telegram, it should hopefully execute the scenario correctly. So let's go ahead and just, we've saved it. Let's go ahead and test the workflow and see if everything's working. Okay, so we are getting an error in the window buffer memory because it's referencing something else that no longer exists. So to fix that, we have to go back here, erase this, and from this little drop down, we need to go ahead all the way back to the Telegram trigger. And let's go ahead and grab the chat ID from this, and that should fix it. Now, finally, we want to add one more node to process images and PDFs. So let's go ahead and test the workflow one more time. And this time we're going to add an attachment. I've already downloaded an image of a dummy receipt, which I'm going to use here. So let's go to the desktop, invoice receipt dummy.jpg. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and send this over. And we should see that Telegram has indeed received a file. Now, since we don't have any rules set up to process image files, we need to go down here. And this time we need to add a new routing rule. And the routing rule that we want to add is if photo. Okay, let's go ahead and select schema. So if the photo array exists, then we want to follow this new path, right? Now that we have the rules set up, just need to test this one more time to see what the existing data was. Okay, so we have to resend this image. I'm just gonna forward it back to YT expense tracker. Okay, oops, and we'll see that we have indeed pulled this data. Now we can go ahead and we can go to Telegram, get a file, and we needed to execute the previous node to get the image information. So I'm going to scroll down, and we'll see that this is a fairly small one. Let's scroll down and see until we can find the biggest one available, which is photo 3. And the file ID is file ID from photo 3. We can go ahead and drag that when we do want to download it. So if we go ahead and test this, we should see a similar output saying data over here. Perfect. So now that we had the file here, we have so now that we have the image downloading ready, let's go ahead and clean this up. This is fine. And now that we've downloaded the image, the next step is to use an OCR API to read the contents of this image. And the OCR API that I recommend using is this one, OCR.space, which gives you a free OCR API. If you go ahead and click up here, you'll see that the free plan lets you give 25,000 requests a month, and the file size is 1 MB or a 3-page PDF, which is really incredible if you think about it. And you can just click this link to register for your API key. They'll send you an email with the API key. So to set this up, we need to add a HTTP request node, right? And the request is going to be a post request to this URL here, api.ocr.space/parse/image. No authentication, but we do want to send headers because the API key is going to go in the header. So the name of the API key header is just API key. The value is your API key that you got in your email. And then we can scroll down and we do need to send a body. And the body content type is form data. The parameter type is a n8n binary file, which is going to be the result of get a file. And you can find that under the binary tab. The name is file, which corresponds to this here. And you can ignore the _1, and the data field name is data, right? And if we go ahead and test this step, it should output the result of this OCR reading. So let's go ahead and test. And we'll see that indeed the contents of the receipt have been parsed, and we'll see that the total is $29.01. Amazing. So now that we've set up the OCR for reading images, we need to send this information back into here to include in our final prompt. So we may need to clean this canvas up a little bit. Let's go ahead and move some of these things further back so there's some room to deal with. So there's some room that we have to work with. We can leave this down here. And we need to hook this up to edit fields and go back here. And we also need to add the result of this HTTP request and parsed text. This is what we need to add. Perfect. So far we have set up functionality for reading images. We also need to set up functionality for reading PDFs. So we can test the workflow one more time. And this time we want to send a PDF to our expense tracker. So let's go ahead and send a PDF. We have to go back into Switch, add a routing rule where value 1 is document. Yeah. And if we go to JSON, or excuse me, if we go to schema, we'll see that document is an object. So we go down object and exists, right? So if document exists, that is the route that we want to enable. So you'll see that a third node has been enabled. So with the third node enabled, we don't need to repeat the process of getting, we don't need to add more nodes for getting the file. We can just hook this up directly here. And we need to double click here. And instead of this being the file ID, we can go ahead and execute the earlier nodes by resending this. And just adding the file ID that we got here. So we have document and file ID, right? You have to choose the last one because we don't want the thumbnail. We want the actual document itself. Just go ahead and drag this here. And if this returns blank, it's going to process this. So that's that. We can go ahead and hit save. And let's test that one more time. So with this automation pretty much set up and ready to go, let's go ahead and give it one final test. Let's go ahead and hit save. And let's go to test workflow, go back to Telegram. And this time, let's go ahead and send it an image and see if it works or not. So I'm going to choose photo or video, receipt dummy.jpg, send, and let's see whether it works or not. And we'll see that indeed a new record has been created. And if we go back to Telegram, I've added the expense of $29.01 for dining at Main Street Restaurant on April 7, 2017 as an eating out category. Amazing, right? And we can do the same test with PDFs as well. So let's go back to test. This time, let's send a PDF. I've added the expense of $20 for Claude Pro services on September 10th, 2024. Perfect. And we can also test with a voice note. I spent $25 on a bag of luxury coffee beans. And since it's asking if it should use the current date, let's just go ahead, go back to test. You say yes. I've added the expense of $25 for a bag of luxury coffee beans to the food category using today's date. And if we go to Airtable, we'll see that all of our entries have indeed been created. So there you have it, your own personal expense tracker ready to go. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more automation and AI content.